Let's go now to former Foreign Minister of Australia, Bob Carr, former New South Wales Premier too. Thanks for joining us, Bob. Good to talk to you and pick
Pleasure,
your
Chris.
brains about your knowledge of American history. Firstly, let's talk about the 1960s in the US, the civil unrest, the polarisation of the debate, the political violence. Are we getting to a similar era of polarisation and trauma in American politics now?
Yeah, if you look at the 60s, you had riots, black riots in the streets of all major American cities. That added an extra element that you haven't got today. You also had, far worse than what you had a few years ago in response to the relations between police and America's African-American population. So that was an ingredient you had in the 60s you haven't got today. Whether you'd have, I don't think you're going to have demonstrations like those in the 1968 Chicago Convention of the Democratic Party. That was really violent. It was a police riot against half-crazed demonstrators, some provocateurs, half-crazed, others quite peaceable. They're elements you haven't got today, but don't forget in 68 you had two assassinations, Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy. We're at about the same time as the Robert Kennedy assassination in the year. That was after the Californian primary. I think that was June. So there's time for this to be bad if there's another attempt at murdering one of the candidates.
Well, it's important to tone this down. Now, I know Donald Trump and his supporters at times have gone too far. I don't want to waste too much time on that because the whole world has focused on that for about the last 6 years. But don't the Democrats need to accept some responsibility for the way they have demonised Donald Trump and ratcheted that up continuously over the last number of years?
Well, we can get into this agonising assessment, who did it first. But Chris, I gotta say, when Donald Trump, remember the attack on Nancy Pelosi's husband at their home in San Francisco? He was seriously battered by an intruder, and Trump's response was the response you would never have had from a George Bush Jr. or a George Bush Sr. or a Ronald Reagan. Trump and close Trump supporters promoted false claims that Paul Pelosi had somehow brought the onslaught upon himself through a sexual misadventure. Donald Trump jeered and mocked. Now, the decent response would have been for Trump, with his status, former president, to have expressed real regret and to have sent Nancy Pelosi and her husband best wishes. So this was dropping of the bar.
Bob Carr, I don't disagree with that. I won't disagree with any of the times Trump supporters or Trump himself have gone too far. But the point is that instead of taking the high ground as they've claimed to take, the Democrats have talked about him as Hitler, as a complete threat to democracy, that if they lose this election, there'll be a dictatorship in the US. Of course, this just amplifies all sorts of hatreds and animosities in the body politic.
Well, I'll give another example that I think completes the indictment of Trump and his behaviour.
Yeah, but
you had Governor Gretchen Whitmer.
Bob Carr,
I'll just take a moment.
We all know about Donald Trump. My point is about the Democrats taking some responsibility for toning down their own language.
I'll come to the Democrats, but this is important. When there was a right-wing extremist plot to abduct her as governor of Michigan, Trump belittled the threat at a rally and he disparaged her as a political enemy. The decent response would have been for Trump to have said, "This is appalling." The way Biden had responded to the assassination attempt on Trump. He should have said, "This is appalling that a governor, yes, a Democrat, that a governor doing her duty to the people of Michigan would have been subject to the possibility of being kidnapped." He didn't say that.
Isn't the decent...
Again, this is a lowering of the bar against violent talk and encouragement of violence. And then there's January 6th. Now, when it comes to the Democrats, I think you've got to, throwing around comparisons with Hitler, invoking fascism, has got to be approached with a bit of finesse. I would say the furthest you can go, is Trump a fascist, is to say that his postures and his rhetoric have tones of fascist leadership over the years. I'd be thinking of Mussolini. But it's probably not worth pursuing that because there's enough incontestable stuff on which to condemn him.
Bob Carr, Joe Biden, though, from the White House has been saying that Donald Trump would be a dictator if he was elected, that the whole future of American democracy is on the line. Isn't that unnecessarily and recklessly inflammatory?
Well, look at two things Trump has carefully committed himself to do. One is to deport aliens who haven't got immigration papers. Now, that would mean, and he expressly said that in his first year, Chris, he'd deport 1 million of them.
Yeah,
now, that is a massive mobilisation.
See, the issue here is, Bob, sorry, because we do have limited time. And look, we could talk for an hour about what a rogue Donald Trump is, and that's been 24/7 on most of the world's media for the past 6 years. What I'm trying to get at is the Democrats who hold the White House at the moment and their culpability for, instead of lowering the tone, actually amplifying the rhetoric and escalating the divide and polarisation in the body politic.
But they're up against a Republican opponent who says, I'll round up 1 million people living in America, regardless of whether they're married to Americans, regardless of whether they hold jobs, regardless of whether they work in aged care or disability care, and I'll deport them. That's going to be a massive nationwide exercise in detaining people, sticking them in camps till they can be bussed across the border. The second thing he's committed to is weaponising the Justice Department, and he's on record saying he will go after critics of his administration in the next. Now,
all right.
No wonder. If he says things like that, he's really inviting.
Well, you're saying the excuse for this polarisation and violent rhetoric from Democrats and their supporters is Trump, because he's a rogue.
Absolutely.
They have to escalate.
Absolutely. I think if you look at the record, Chris, you've got to say Trump has degraded the public debate. There is no other Republican, not Ted Cruz, not Marco Rubio, who would say and do the things in the style that Trump has done. If they were running for president.
Well, the issue is the justice system. The justice system obviously has been weaponised against him, so it's legitimate for him to raise that. And my point, I keep getting back to this: that the Democrats keep telling the people of America that the very future of their country is on the ballot paper this time. That Trump will be a dictator, and they keep escalating this hysteria. Let me at least get your views on Joe Biden, then, Bob Carr. Do you think, in the interests of American democracy and of the Democratic Party, Joe Biden should stand aside in favour of a fresh ticket?
He should stand aside. He should have made the decision out of respect for the political system in the US, as Truman did in 1952, as Lyndon Johnson did in 1968, which a year you invoked at the start of the interview. He should have made the decision at the start of the presidential election year. It would have given his own party, who treated him with great respect and delivered great support to him, it would have given the Democratic Party time to have arranged a process, time to have had open primaries. Instead, there's a convention about to descend on the party with the delegates, over 90% of them, over 95% of them, locked up, committed to Biden. I think he's locked himself in. He's done his party a huge disadvantage. And this, combined with the attempted assassination, leaves Trump sitting pretty, I think, to win the presidency in November.
Thanks for joining us, Bob Carr. I appreciate your time.